perpetually standing in the breach and always ready to stay in the fight. Coming to you from an undisclosed broadcast location. Presented by AR-500 Armor. The Armored Republic cometh. This is Lock and Load with Bill Frady.
All right. Coming to you live from the AR-500 Armor radio studio. This is Lock and Load. This portion of the show is brought to you by Franklin Armory.
Franklin Armory makes top-quality AR-style firearms for sports, military, and law enforcement. 100% made in America parts and materials. We manufacture revolutionary 3-position binary triggers that can be selected to fire on the pull and release, or set to fire normally. We strongly support and uphold our Second Amendment. We hope you do too. Get a 10% discount when you mention the code word Lock and Load at FranklinArmory.com.
Indeed. Check them out at FranklinArmory.com. You know, I like to get the different perspectives from everybody out there, and one of the best perspectives out there is somebody who just sort of watches and writes books and comments, and I like the writers. I like a lot of the writers. So joining me today, it's been a while since he's been with me, is author of Good Gun, Bad Guy. That would be Dan Wos. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Bill, thanks for having me. You know, it's always great to be on your show because, and I really like talking to you because you really care about this stuff. You're very articulate and you really have your finger on the pulse of gun rights and things like that. Because right now we're in a very touchy position. We have to be very careful.
Yeah, we are. And it helps to take a look at things and try to figure out and get the gauge of what's happening around there, and that's what I'm trying to do with all of you writers, because writers think of things in a different sort of context. At least that's been which I sort of envy writers because they have that capability. So let's start with the election. Any surprises there for you?
No, actually a little bit. I mean, I thought that we would lose more. We actually did very well when you look at the numbers of how many seats we lost compared to previous administrations. Right.
Yeah, it's not nearly the tidal wave, the tsunami. That's the blue tsunami.
Hey, it would have been great to hold on, to the House, but I suppose if we had to lose the House, we couldn't have really done it any better,
Well, it's going to be very entertaining because Nancy Pelosi's been waiting for a long time. Do you remember when she was first made Speaker of the House in 2006?
Yeah. But the interesting thing, she's getting a lot of opposition from her own party right now, which is kind of fun to watch.
Well, she has that special gavel that's like the size of a croquet mallet that she likes to run around with, and I remember that picture of her. I was just thinking, how big is she? I mean, I've never seen other speakers of the House. It just looks like a hammer to me, but in her hands, it looks like a croquet mallet. So
maybe she's like 3 feet tall. We don't really know.
I don't know. She's Lilliputian or something. Anyway, yeah. So that is liable to be sort of entertaining today.
Sure. There's so much other stuff going on too. I mean, with all these red flag laws in different states, and talking about the borderline situation, the Alabama situation, 1639. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we need to be aware of, and it's a good thing we have gun rights groups fighting for us in court. We need to support those groups. Pick the group you like and the group you associate best with, and support them because they're doing a great job.
See, one of the dirty little stories, though, about all these gun groups is they all belong to each other.
That's the thing about you. You know the inside stories on all this
stuff.
They
do. Everybody at Gun Owners of America are members of, and lifetime members of NRA. A lot of NRA members are members of Gun Owners of America. There are a lot of Second Amendment Foundation are members of both, and everybody reciprocates. And I don't know. I've looked at the way some of these guys operate, and it's almost like they have assigned themselves each a role, And they are really, really good at it, but nobody does the same thing.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
There's no redundancy there. So let's real quick, let's touch it, because New York is about to, Cuomo has teed up a extreme risk protection gun violence restraining order. I call these minority report laws, because these are about things you might do. Not about anything you have done, but these are things that you might do. So in Maryland the other day, we got to see what it would be like, gun confiscation, what that would be like.
Yeah.
Because they went to serve one of these orders. His relative turned him in, and they went to serve one of these orders, and they killed the guy. His last name was, I think his name is Gary Willis, 60-year-old dude.
Yes, Gary Willis. Yeah, and man, what a shame, because all this guy is doing, it seems that he's just trying to, he's in his house. They're coming to his house, to his front door,
right,
and telling him that he's got to, turn over his guns. And this, I was, reading a little bit more on these laws, these red flag laws, and they started in Connecticut in 1999, and I guess from what I'm getting is that the original idea of these red flag laws was to stop suicides. Well, as it turns out, the CDC did a study that showed that it only prevented, these red flag laws only prevented 1.6 of gun-related suicides in Connecticut.
Right.
And but these people went on, the people who didn't have guns because of their mental condition, went on to commit suicide by other means. So, in other words, what they've done is they've made millions of people unarmed and helpless in order to switch suicides from gun to something else.
Sure.
And that doesn't make any logical sense. The whole idea here is, the anti-gun politicians are really looking at these red flag laws as the latest way to control gun owners. And until one of these goes to the Supreme Court, they'll continue to do it. But a lot of these sound very similar to the Heller case. Like we may have another Heller on our hands.
Well, I'm waiting for one of these to work their way through the court. The other part about this that I really don't like is that there's not going to be, if you get out there and you kill too many people that haven't committed a crime, we're going to have another Bundy Ranch situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And rightfully so. One of the things that I have talked about before, like, I don't know if you know this or not, but like Apple patented this software where they could look at they could look out and use your mobile signals and your Wi-Fi signals, and then they could send out this message. And all of the Apple devices out there would not be able to text and or shoot video.
Huh. Wow.
And they never did anything with it, but some law enforcement agencies have bought it. Now,
I see where you're going.
Yeah, the problem herein lies is that law enforcement, there's only one of them for every 19,000 of us. So I can see where they would probably want to keep this kind of thing from getting out if they did something. I'm almost certain that they didn't go there with the intention of killing Mr. Willis, except Mr. Willis showed up because somebody was knocking on his door late at night with a gun.
Right.
And, that won't be, I don't think that's a good idea that happened too many times. Some of these police chiefs need to step up and say, we can't be going around and killing our citizens now, can we?
Well, not only that, they're putting their police officers in danger too, and the cops are trying to do their job and do what they're told to do.
Sure.
So it's a mess all the way around, and it all stems from these anti-gun politicians sitting at the top of the heap.
I'll tell you what I think of those guys when we get back. Coming up on the first break, you can find Dan's book, Good Gun Bad Guy, at Amazon.com and at goodgunbadguy.net. Volumes 1 and 2. Go check it out. We'll be right back. This is Lock and Load. But anyway, we are talking to Dan Wos, author, commentator, media guy, Corvette collector, and musician. Is there an ascending order to that, or is it just however I take it?
I don't know. I guess first and foremost, I'm a father and a husband, but
okay.
But all that other stuff comes next, and it's all great too. Hey, life is good. I figure we're only here for a relatively short amount of time, 80 to 100 years, and we may as well, make the most of it.
It is a geological blip.
Yeah, right. Oh, hey, relatively speaking, yeah, it's a tiny little. We're here for a very short time, so.
So in New York, Cuomo, I guess he discovered he didn't have a red flag order because he's just about got every other gun control thing happening there. He's now moving in that direction, right?
Yeah, well, he is moving toward the extreme risk protection order, as they call it.
Now, you made reference to this, and I have to admit I didn't have time to check on this. But before we get into the extreme risk protection order, you said something about him making a threat to gun owners on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh shoot! I wish I had that tweet handy so I could read it word for word. But basically, he took the liberal position and said something to the effect that thoughts and prayers don't help; that they need to take action. And of course, to the anti-gun liberals, action means more gun restrictions rather than looking at what's causing human violence and looking at some of their failed Democrat policies. So, but yeah, so he made a veiled threat through 2 or 3 tweets recently, and I was asked by our local WNYT, I think it's an NBC affiliate in Albany, New York, and I went on and did a hit on their station in Albany, and they wanted my response. And basically, I told them how I feel, and how really what this is a way for Governor Cuomo to he's got his beer muscles right now because he's back in office, and he wants to either he's playing to his voters, or he really does want more gun restrictions because he's threatening to push more extreme protection orders. And I can give you kind of an idea of what this New York extreme protection order is.
Okay.
Basically, it's someone can consider you a risk, and what they're doing is they're giving this authority to school officials. They call certified school officials. So what happens now, what could potentially happen if this goes into law, is substitute teacher or a teacher's assistant, anybody who's certified, could say, well, little Johnny is a risk to society. So now Big Johnny gets his guns taken away,
right,
come to the house, similar to, Gary Willis in Maryland. And now Big Johnny's got about 2 days to get a lawyer to defend himself, to prove his innocence, to get his guns back, because they instantly will take the guns, just like they tried with the Maryland guy. So it's terrible. So the idea that New York officials want to give this type of authority to somebody who's never held a gun in their hand. So a teacher's assistant, anybody certified. That was the thing that really caught my attention in this bill. Certified, and I asked around. I said, "Well, who's certified?" And some of my family members told me, "Well, a substitute teacher and a teacher's assistant, they're certified." Like,
certified by what? Certified to do what?
Well, certified to either substitute teach or perform their job, because they have to be certified, I guess, by the school board or by whatever school standards. And I'm getting out of my scope here, but because they are certified, they can make that determination that little Johnny may or may not be a threat. So it's scary to me.
Well, and here's the thing, like in California, they did one, theirs is called the Gun Violence Restraining Order, with Elliot Rogers. The sheriff's deputies went out there and saw that guy. They went out there and saw that kid, and they have something called Code 5150, which is, I like saying it just because, Van Halen had that album, but that's actually a penal code for somebody who is a danger to themselves or others. And that was already in place, and they could have done that with Elliot Rodgers, and they did not. And the thing with their gun violence restraining order was sort of largely a result to Elliot Rodgers, who went through all the other gun control functions, like the guy in Borderline, the Borderline shooter. He went through all of the existing California gun control hoops. So,
another thing that they also use, and they want to push this one, is the domestic violence accusation. So if you're accused of committing domestic violence, and I was reading up on domestic violence. It's not only girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse. It's anyone living in the house, and that could be, so that means anybody who lives in the same premises as you can accuse you of being violent. And now all of a sudden you lose your rights because of an accusation of someone who could potentially not have any credibility at all.
Right.
So this stuff absolutely must be stopped, and it must be stopped in every state. And if it has to go to Supreme Court, which I tend to think now, and I'd like your opinion on this too. Do you think that some of these cases are more likely now to go to the Supreme Court? Because in the past it's been kind of Supreme Court didn't like to take these cases, but would you think now that would be any different? Would we be more likely to get more of these cases in the Supreme Court?
Well, I'll tell you, we're coming up on the next break, and when we get back, I will give you my opinion on that.
Cool. Because
I do have one, but in the meantime, if you're looking for a good book to read, start with Volume 1. Go get Good Gun, Bad Guy by Dan Wos. You can find it on goodgunbadguy.net or Amazon, and you can catch him here whenever I can catch him on the phone. So we'll be right back. This is Lock and Load. Coming to you live from the AR-500 Armor Radio Studio. This is Lock and Load. This portion of the show is brought to you by Franklin Armory.
Franklin Armory makes top-quality AR-style firearms for sports, military, and law enforcement. 100% made in America parts and materials. We manufacture revolutionary 3-position binary triggers that can be selected to fire on the pull and release, or set to fire normally. We strongly support and uphold our Second Amendment. We hope you do too. Get a 10% discount when you mention the code word Lock and Load at franklinarmory.com.
Indeed. Check them out, franklinarmory.com. I'm talking to Dan Wos, author, father, husband, guitar player, musician, Corvette collector. I always like just saying that, too, by the way. You're the only Corvette collector I know. So before we left, Dan had asked me if I thought that something was going to happen regarding these minority report laws, or as they like to say, the extreme risk protection laws. Yeah, I do, because the whole premise behind this is it's all based upon your propensity to commit something violent. It has nothing to do at all with any violence you might have already done. And since they've now killed one guy serving one of these orders, and it's only going to take one. It's only going to take one case to make it to the Supreme Court and for them to vacate and say this is unconstitutional. And any other jurisdiction, like I think Maryland would fall under the Fourth Circuit, so they would say, yeah, this is fine. So then it's going to get... Anytime with Ninth Circuit, Fourth Circuit, any of these guys that now let it go to the Supreme Court, I mean, the leftists have got to be sort of nervous about that one because, Ruth Bader did fall down and break a rib. She's having to telecommute now.
Oh, is she? I didn't know if she was back at work or not.
No, she's having to do it from home.
That's the thing. I would never wish that on the old woman. I mean, she's old, and that's got to be really extremely painful for anybody. So the idea that that Republicans are happy that she hurt herself is absolutely ridiculous. We don't wish that on anybody. But it might be time. I mean, she is old, and wouldn't it be time to bring in some new blood?
Well, it's going to be Trump's pick, though, and that's the thing that they're.
Well, I know.
I can't wait to see what would happen in the United States. We just saw them have just absolute conniption fits with Kavanaugh.
Yeah, they'd go bananas.
They'd go bananas. But I think, as soon as all the dust settles and everything, I think somebody in this guy's family, if they're not doing it, well, I don't know what to think about the Willis family, but somebody needs to be going after somebody over a wrongful death, because they were out there to, what was this? Did this guy have a record? I don't know. Was he known to law enforcement? I don't know.
I didn't read anything. The one thing I did read was that his family said that he was outspoken, but he was a harmless guy. So maybe he was, an outspoken conservative, which I'm thankful for that he is, and everybody should be. But they said he was basically a harmless guy. So, the whole thing is, and you made a good point that so. You seem to be right in line with my thought as well, that it will go eventually to the Supreme Court, and the liberals will be on the run with this sort of thing, because the whole thing with these red flag laws or whatever you want to call, whatever they're called, extreme risk protection, is that they violate due process and they violate the Second Amendment. Like we talked a little bit about the 1639.
Right.
That's just outrageous, some of the violations, and maybe we could touch on that too.
We can, if you would like. I mean, it's so bad. The 1639 is such a bad topic. I've got the business development manager from Aero Precision. They operate in Washington State. He's coming on the show right after you do. So yes, we can certainly talk about some 1639, because that's a big thing.
Well, I haven't gotten too deep into it, but I got some bullet points here, and I was looking at it and I'm going, oh my gosh. See, anyway, a couple things. They want to switch 18 to 21 for semi-automatics, a training course, a 10-day waiting period. They love these waiting periods because they actually think that, and here's the crazy thing. When was the last time anybody who killed somebody else with a gun went to the gun shop, bought the gun, and went directly to the crime spot? It went directly from the gun shop to kill somebody. They want to make it. They want to make people think that human beings are these reactive. As soon as we get our hands on a gun, we want to do bad things with it. So that waiting period is absolutely ridiculous. A yearly recertification checks. This is troublesome because, if you forget to recertify, you've now become a paper felon.
Right.
And then your rights are gone. They want to push for trigger locks and safes and things like that by saying if someone else in the household, or anybody else for that matter, gets a hold of your gun, you are responsible for whatever happens with that gun. And so what they're really doing with that is they're really trying to push to not come right out and say it's mandatory to have trigger locks or safes, but they want to do everything they can to encourage people to make sure their guns are locked.
But how do they? The only way for them to enforce it then is to violate the Fourth Amendment. Well, yeah, exactly, exactly. It's
the same thing as Heller, the Heller case. We're getting into that. Or was it McDonald? Which one am I confusing the two? Anyway, but the one thing about this 1639 that's really annoying more than anything is they want to charge a $25 fee to purchasers through the dealer to pay for the costs of all this nonsense that infringe on the purchaser's rights. So now the purchaser has to pay an extra fee so their rights can be infringed.
Right.
Ridiculous.
Well,
am I off on this?
No, I don't think you're off. I don't think you're off on it at all. There's other aspects to it too that goes along with it, but that one they're trying really hard to be like California. California has a 10-day waiting period, and this shooter that just shot up Borderline waited. And he took the course. And he waited 30 days, but, he was in that. Elliot Rogers, who bought 3 guns for his little rampage, he did that 3 separate times. He bought a gun, waited 10 days, took his little course, then waited 30 days, and then bought the next gun, and then waited 10 days. And he did that, and these guys that are deliberate powder kegs are patient.
Yeah.
I guess the whole impetus behind this waiting period was that this would give you off a cooling off period. I hate to tell you this, but if you are sitting there and like a crime of passion is where somebody says something to me and I just snap and I hit them and they hit their head going down on the curb and it kills them. That's a crime of passion. Premeditation occurs when I say, I'm going to go in here and get this bat and come and kill this guy. Right. Or I'm going to go to this gun shop and buy this gun and come and kill this guy. Now we're in premeditated murder. That's a whole other, bundle of things to consider. So, it's all based upon a false premise. And, I would expect if not this it should be this Willis family. The Willis family should be leading the way on this first thing, though, with the Minority Report. I call it that because I always picture, the wooden pool ball having a name inscribed on it, and Tom Cruise jumping in his flying snail and going off and catching the people from the movie. I'm talking to Dan Wos. He is a author. He is a gun rights advocate. He is a shooter. He is a musician, and he is a frequent guest. We'll be right back. This is Lock and Load. And if you look in there and if you're buying parts or something, use that code word, would you? I'd appreciate that. FranklinArmory.com. I am talking to author and commentator Dan Wos. Let's talk a little bit. Let's finish this hour with Borderline. Now, have you ever noticed how there's some rampage murder incidences where the gun grabbers come out in full force, and this is going to be the one that's the wind at their backs, and then there'll be some other one that seems, it seems equally heinous to me, except they don't congregate to that one for some reason. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, they don't, because it doesn't fit their narrative and their agenda for whatever reason.
Right.
Borderline is interesting because it could have been stopped very easily, but there were 2 things that jumped out at me. First of all, the killer met no opposition when he got there. The security guard that was on site at the front door was, wait for it, unarmed. What kind of security guard, what do you expect a security guard to do if he's unarmed? So, now, the question is why? Why was he unarmed? And my guess, and we haven't got a lot of information on, maybe you have more information on this particular incident than I do, but I haven't seen a lot of information. My guess is that this is Southern California.
Right.
And you're in Liberalville, and they don't believe in arming their security guards.
Well,
have you ever heard of such a...
an unarmed security guard is not a security guard. What is he able to secure?
Yeah, exactly. Nothing.
Nothing. So, that's the thing about the gun-free zone, too. I'm waiting for some laws to be passed where if you get out there and say, well, listen, we have shall issue in your state, but if you want to, as a business, you can declare your business a gun-free zone. Well, I don't like guns, so I don't want any of my business. However, if you do that, you do have to provide for some form of security in case something does happen, because we do live in the psychotropic drug age of single-parented people that seem to want to go in and kill a bunch of people at one time.
Well, you mentioned gun-free zones. Let me mention something here.
Sure.
I live in a beautiful city called Saratoga Springs in upstate New York. We're known for our racetrack and just some of the best restaurants in the country. Saratoga Springs, beautiful place to be. Except it's gone absolutely crazy politically. The Saratoga Springs School Board has decided after 30 years they're going to disarm their security. It was a vote that was 5-4 in favor of disarming their security after 30 years with no incidents. No incidents for 30 years, and now all of a sudden they want to do that. So gun-free zones are, and I went and I spoke at the board meeting, and expressed some of the views, my view, and showed them some statistics, some CDC reports, some statistics that show guns will save millions of lives per year.
Right.
They didn't want to hear any of it. They don't understand. Whether they understand it or not is a different story. But they seem to be sticking to. Even the mayor, who's an anti-gun mayor, and her city council are urging the school board to rearm the security. And there's one person. All they need is one person to flip that vote, and they won't do it. Astonishing to me. And you know what happens if one kid gets hurt in that school?
Right.
The blood is on the hands of those 5 school board members that voted for those children's unarmed helplessness.
Right. We should, in the modern era, we should not have had a school shooting since Columbine, but we've never taken those steps. But have you ever noticed this? Do you have any children in school right now?
No, one just out of college.
Okay. But I'm sure that you probably saw this. Now, if you were driving your kids to school, they always have these school zone signs, and they have reduced speed limits. But they always post cops there at school time. Now, why do they always post cops there at school time?
For speed, with respect to the speed limits?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't know.
Well, they post cops there because they know nobody's going to. The signs don't. When you drive past the sign, it doesn't regulate your car automatically and make it go down to that speed. So
good point. Gotcha.
They know that they have to actively enforce that. Gun-free zones are the only signs that they put out where they're not actually actively trying to enforce that. Yeah.
Well, the anti-gun crowd wants to push the idea, the notion, the false notion that the kids feel uncomfortable. The truth is, the kids feel more comfortable when they know they're protected. And you know what? And that brings me to this other thing. Let me just mention, let me go, if you don't mind, let's go to this Alabama situation.
Sure.
I don't necessarily, we don't need to get into laws and stuff. We talk about the laws and restrictions and all that stuff. Let me talk about the most important thing here that I see. It's a guy named Marcus Washington. He was the employee. He was the one he was in the process of making 2 quarter-pounders. You might remember that.
Right.
His quotes, there's 2 quotes by him, and this is what we all need to take away from this. Marcus Washington said, quote, "I'm feeling grateful," he told this, and let me just back up a little bit. This is where the armed citizen killed the bad guy, right? Marcus Washington says, quote, "I'm grateful," he told the station. "Wrapping my head around it all, I was just wishing someone would come wake me up from this nightmare." His second quote was, "He's my hero," referring to the armed citizen, "because
right.
I can only imagine how it would have went if he wasn't armed. We might not be here having this interview." He recognizes the importance of firearms with respect to the safety of people.
Well, he's like the mugged leftist who wakes up and becomes a conservative.
Yes,
he's a believer now, and that guy was leaving, but he stopped the rampage killer in his tracks, and that's because a rampage killer is looking for the easiest amount of resistance, and if you engage him, well, now he's got to engage you back. So he forgets about being a rampage killer, and he's just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was an excellent example of what happens. Do you know the stat on when an armed citizen is present with a rampage killer operating?
Well, I do know that there was a CDC report that said guns are used in America per year 2.46 million times per year.
Up to 3. Yep.
To save lives.
Yep.
Now, But the thing is, that doesn't necessarily mean the good guy killing the bad guy. That often means the mere presence of the gun. That means a good guy with a gun in his belt will often deter the bad guy. So
I think it's
statistics that we just can't ignore.
I think 97% of the time we don't pull the trigger. But we're very, very effective at it. But the statistic is when an armed citizen is present with a rampage killer going into operation, average loss of life is 2.5 versus when you wait for the cops is 18.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're about to run out of time, though, Dan. It goes fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. But it's good conversation. Always with you. Always.
Yeah. So tell everybody where they find the book.
Oh, goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com or search Good Gun Bad Guy in Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
And he'll probably start selling pictures of him very soon with his various Corvettes.
Yeah, I'll send one over to you, Donna. I'll send one down to you. You can cruise around.
Yeah, what, a Corvette? Or I would just take a picture. That'd be fine. Yeah, but if you...
Why not send the real thing?
Yeah, if you've got a bubble wrap envelope, that'll fit in, too. I'll give you my address tomorrow. Thank you for joining me today, sir.
All right, pal. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Talk soon.
All right. Coming up next.
If you want more interviews by me, click one of the videos on the right. And remember, your Second Amendment, it's not a privilege, it's your right.